Optics, one of the single most important pieces of gear in your kit. You're going to use them way more than you could ever imagine. But optics are also something that is hard to understand. You've got a whole bunch of different numbers. You've got a whole vast range of different budgets that you can go with. So I am joined by Reuben Aleckson of Vortex, and we're going to give you a full breakdown of optics. What sizes you should be looking at, what budgets you should be looking at. If you're going to run a spotting scope with binoculars, how should the two coincide? How should the two work together? If I have this size spotting scope, what size binoculars should I look at? If I've got this size binoculars, what size spotting scope should I look at? If you do have the budget to build multiple optics kits for different style of hunts, what would those look like? I would encourage you to buy a couple pair of binoculars at a lower budget, at a lower price point, than one really, really, really good pair of binoculars if you have different pursuits. We're going to cover all that and more. We're also just going to cover tips to get the most out of your optics. We're going to cover tips on how to use your optics most effectively. Guys, it is an incredibly informative episode. And as somebody who was what I would consider to be an optics snob in the past, what I've learned about Vortex is that no matter if it's $200 or it's $2,000, if it says Vortex, you can trust it. One of the best parts about Vortex is their warranty. If I back over them mugs in my truck, if I forget where I put them and I run over them, they replace them. It's incredible. It's a one-time buy. And that's something that can give you peace of mind. Going into buying new optics can be a little scary sometimes because sometimes the price tags are big, but you have to know, I'm going to buy these and I'm going to have this pair for the rest of my life because if anything happens, Vortex replaces them. Guys, it's a really, really good episode. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at ScentLock. The BE1 Toolkit is a toolkit of clothing built for bow hunters by bow hunters. And with activated carbon, it offers you maximum odor absorption. They truly, when they built the BE1 Toolkit, they truly thought of every piece that a bow hunter needs. I would highly, highly encourage you as you're getting ready for this fall, go check out the BE1 Toolkit from ScentLock. You will not be disappointed. Let's jump in with Reuben and talk all things optics.
For the true sportsman, it's more than a pastime. It's a way of life. Embrace the lifestyle of hunting, fishing, and the thrill of the wild. Live the life. Be typical.
Guys, I am all about prioritizing your feet. If you take care of your feet on the mountains or in the tree stand, you will just undoubtedly last longer. I remember the first time I ever went out west wearing a cheap pair of boots and cotton socks. Hot spots and blisters absolutely just took over that hunt. And here's what I learned. The more comfortable your feet are, the further you'll go, the faster you'll get there, the longer you'll stay on the mountain, and you'll just hunt better because your mind is on the hunt, not on your feet. That's when I come upon Schnee's. Schnee's makes the best mountain boots, in my opinion. I'm going to go ahead and tell you my favorite pair. My favorite pair is the Timberlines. I have ran the mountain in those on several different occasions, several different climates, several different, terrain types. And those boots just seem to always perform. They're light, they're fast, they're comfortable. There's no break in. They're Italian made. They're high quality, phenomenal boots. However, I'm also here in the Midwest, do a lot of Midwest hunting, a lot of tree stand hunting. And I'm a big fan of rubber boots for that. Here's why. Leather holds scent. So I'm a big fan that I don't want any leather on my feet when I'm whitetail hunting, walking in and out of my tree stands. So I've always been a leather boot guy. A couple years ago, Schnee's introduced the Highwoods. They now have it in a 0 gram insulation and a 400 gram insulation. It's a phenomenal rubber boot. Again, I have pushed those boots really hard. I've actually used them on quite a few snowy pheasant hunts, walked a lot of miles in them. They're super, super comfortable, super warm, super tough. Guys, prioritize your feet. Take care of your feet. If you're sitting in a tree stand, make sure your feet are going to be warm. If you're on the mountain, make sure you've got a good pair of merino socks and a good pair of boots so you can stay on the mountain longer. hunt harder, be more successful. Guys, go to schnees.com. That's SCHNEES.com for the best boots money can buy. All right, Reuben, before we jump into this, man, give us an introduction to yourself. How did you get to Vortex? How long you been there? And was it a love for optics that brought you to Vortex, or did Vortex create in you a love of optics?
Thanks, Dylan. Appreciate you having me. My background, I grew up in a hunting outdoors family. Like I wouldn't be doing any of this without my dad and brother and brother-in-law and uncles and cousins getting me into it. And so I came to Vortex back in about 2012 as kind of a outside brand representative in the competitive shooting space. And then in 2014, I came here full time to the office in South Central Wisconsin. And I think the best way to say it would be Vortex was a company that really appealed to me from how they treated people. So I worked retail for a couple of years before I worked here, and had been able to deal directly with Vortex, and getting our product and stocking it on the shelves of the retail store I worked at. And man, every interaction was like top notch. It was like nothing I had experienced elsewhere in the industry. And my dad and uncles owned an outdoor recreation based company, building products for mostly the fishing industry. And so I'd had a lot of exposure and experience kind of in the industry, what we call like the outdoor industry. And yeah, I guess as a kid growing up that lived to hunt and fish, like that's the dream, right? Like you want to find a place that you can do what you love. Kind of say it today, like even on the busiest days with the most amount of work, you're still talking about optics. You're still talking about hunting. You're still answering emails about shooting. And so, the whole do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life really was something that was appealing to me. And over time, I think working with customers, getting to be in this industry, working with our retailers, working with end users, I wouldn't say it necessarily created like a passion for optics, but it's an outlet to serve people. And we get to serve people by making products that help them, I guess at Vortex, we kind of use the phrase like help your customers become the hero of their own adventure. Right. And so it's just a cool place. We get to spend a lot of time behind glass, looking through different optics and ultimately getting that feedback, in August and September, being out in the field at a retail location, that parking lot sale, that big, kickoff to hunting season event. And you're talking to hundreds, if not thousands of people about how they use your products, where they use your products, what your products have helped them do. But really, I think, Vortex more than anything is a customer service company that also makes optics. Right. And so, you asked the question, like, was I an optics geek before I started, or did I become one? I don't even know if I'm an optics geek today. I end up having a lot of, information in my head about them. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about seeing people with a smile on their face because they're using a product and they're getting service from you as a company that helps them.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I love it. I love it when you hear, like when you tell somebody, in my case, like, yeah, I work for Pope and Young and host this podcast and they're like, oh, you get to hunt for a living. And I'm like, no, I work for a living. Yep. I just get to work. My work revolves around hunting. And, I just tell people like there's very few people that like strictly get to hunt for a living. If any. I mean, because even if you're the biggest of the biggest TV shows, like that becomes a business in and of itself. And so, but yeah, like you said, man, like I just think there's something important about creating your life around what you're passionate about. And like you said, even on the days where it's like, man, this sucks. Like, well, at least it sucks and it's about hunting rather than it sucks and it's about, finances or insurance or whatever. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And Vortex is one of those companies that I was super excited to align myself with because it's one of those companies that, like, if it says Vortex, you can trust it. Like if it says Vortex, like I don't have to worry about pushing somebody to a Vortex because I know if it says Vortex, they can trust it. And even at the bottom line of budget, if it says Vortex, they can trust it. And like I was sharing with you, it's something that I'm guilty of pushing people to very, very high end optics. And then you almost feel guilty. You're like, man, he did not have the money to spend on that. Sure. And, he did because I told him it was good. And not that Vortex does not make the highest of the high end optics. They do. However, it's just a company that I can feel comfortable with. If somebody calls me and says, I need some binos, but I've only got $200. Like, I got you, man. And so my background with optics is maybe similar to a lot of people. I grew up just whatever binos were at the house. That's what I took out hunting. And the first time I ever headed out west, I moved to Kansas, and we were kind of talking about that before the podcast. But when I moved to Kansas, I realized, like, man, these optics aren't big enough. Like, I got to see further. And still, I was a young married guy. I didn't have the money to drop on optics. So I'm like, well, I know I need something bigger, but I can't really afford it. And then when I was heading out west on my first hunt, I'm like, well, I don't have a spotting scope. And I'm going to need one. And I know my binos are not sufficient for what I'm going to be trying to do. I mean, there's a big difference in, seeing a deer come in from 100 yards and trying to spot bears on a mountain from, 1,000 yards away, 2,000 yards away. And so I just knew, like, okay, I'm going to have to dive deeper into this. Well, at the time I was working with a company who worked very closely with Andrew McKean, which, for those of you who don't know, he's the optics editor for Outdoor Life. And so I'm like, well, I know who can point me in the right direction. And so you call McKean, and he's like giving you this, he's just like throwing up information, and you're like, so I still don't have any idea what I need, Andrew. Right. Like, just tell me a pair of binoculars, tell me a spotting scope I need. And, he tells me like a super high level. And so anytime you go from using a pair of, and I'm not bashing on this brand, but this is just what was around my house. Anytime you go from using a pair of Bushnells that are, 40 years old and they cost $100 40 years ago, and you jump into a high pair of optics, like, you're going to be amazed. It doesn't really matter what brand or what level it is. And so I was just blown away by the level of optics. And so that's what I thought, for the last however many years, like, this is the standard of optics. This is what you have to spend on good optics. And it's just not the case. Like, there are so many companies, Vortex being one of the top tier, that make really good glass that fits every budget. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about different budget lines and maybe what to look for as far as features, as far as quality. Like, if you only have $250, what should you be looking for as far as features in a pair of binoculars or a rangefinder or spotting scopes? If you do have $500, what should you be looking for? And then on the, the flip side of that coin, man, you're ready to invest in a pair of $2,500 binoculars. What should you really be looking for in that tier of binoculars? So I guess before we jump into building out an optics kit, which is kind of what I want to get to, give me kind of like a bird's eye view of the different levels you would say that Vortex offers in optics.
Cool. Yeah. So you mentioned it a little bit, but we talk a little bit about like the different features that an optic has. We would talk a little bit about the quality, and we would talk a little bit about the optical quality. So I would kind of separate things like durability and longevity of a product, and then like optical quality, and then features come in kind of in their own category. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is we've tried to set a standard for durability, so that if you have $100 to spend or $2,200 to spend, you're not necessarily sacrificing in durability or how long that product is going to last. And we can talk a little bit more too. Like, we have a program called the VIP warranty. Every Vortex product is covered under the warranty from the day it's bought to the day it's sold to a friend to the day you find it on the side of a mountain and don't know who owns it. Like, that product is always covered. So we're always going to take care of customers if something happens to that optic, whether it just be a yearly cleaning, full 21-point inspection, all the way to replacement if it's completely broken. So with that being said, though, covering that product, we really don't want it to break. Like, we don't have a desire for that product to break. We want it to last, but we're there for you when it does happen, right? You drop it out of a tree stand or falls out of the duck boat and you find it a year later, right? Like stuff like that is going to happen, but we want to make sure that whether someone has $100 to spend on binoculars or $1,000 to spend, they don't have to necessarily take that hit in durability. So kind of, I would say like the durability and the quality of the product, like how long it's going to last, we try and kind of set a baseline that carries through all the lines. But then when we talk about optical quality or features, that's where maybe you start to see differences. Like if you're looking at our entire lineup, we have kind of an entry level price point, whether it be rifle scopes, red dots, binoculars, spotting scopes, rangefinders. We have an entry level product line called the Crossfire line. That line in binoculars is going to start somewhere around $130 and go up to, call it $220, depending on the features you pick. And this kind of product hierarchy, this product family carries through all those different categories too. So whether you're applying that to rifle scopes or red dots or anything like that, you're going to see that increasing feature set, increasing optical quality, or maybe convenience features go with. So like our product line starts at Crossfire. It goes Diamondback. We call it Diamondback your bang for your buck line. That is the line of products where I think most customers end up buying products at. And so there's a lot of volume there where we're able to give a really, really good value at the price point. And Diamondback products are probably in binoculars are going to start in that $250, maybe up to $350, depending on the layout, the magnification objective combination that you choose. So Crossfire, Diamondback, Viper is where we start to say you start to see really big differences in optical quality. And so Viper line is kind of where we would say you'd see a big jump in glass quality and overall image quality. And so Viper line ends up being this kind of step into premium optics. It's not the top of the top, but it's where you start to see big improvements in glass. Next would be kind of our pinnacle of product quality, which would be our Razor line. So since we're talking about binoculars, I'll kind of break it down. The Razor line is a really simple line. It's got your 8x42, your 10x42, your 1050, your 1250. And by keeping that number of SKUs relatively simple, I think it makes the customer's decision a little bit easier when they're picking. And so then from there, though, we do have that customer that really wants to see that last 10%, that last 5 to 10% of optical quality increase, that gain. And so we offer a line of razors that are called the UHD razors, which is ultra high definition optic. And so that binocular line is for that person who's using them every day. Or maybe in the same way of saying it, money's not really part of the conversation. That's not a prohibiting factor for them. And so the UHD line is the super premium line of binoculars that we make. In the same sense that we have the UHD line on the super premium line category, we also have what I would call a very budget friendly line of product called the Triumph. And the Triumph binocular comes in at around $100. So we're looking at that customer who's maybe it's their first pair of binoculars they buy. Maybe it's somebody who's more budget focused, or maybe it's that new hunter, that new person to the outdoors that saved up money from doing jobs around home, or saved up money from trapping or whatever, right? That newspaper delivery job. Like, we want to provide a product that is very approachable at that price point. And so we kind of have, if you looked at binoculars, about 5 different tiers, from very first pair you need to the thing you're going to use every day, looking for goats, looking for bear, looking for that Coues deer. And so we try and kind of cover all the bases. I would say we're one of the few brands, I think, that offers a super premium product all the way to an entry level product. And we'll talk about this a little bit too, but part of the mindset on some of that, like that product allocation, or who's buying those products, it's not always the most intuitive thing. So, and I'll give you an example. So we might have a customer who, they hunt all the time, or they're out looking for animals on the side of a mountain all the time. Their go-to binoculars, a Razor HD or a Razor UHD. And then they need a pair of binoculars to keep in the truck or in the UTV, or they're going to buy their grandkids a pair of binoculars for Christmas. Like, it doesn't always just say like this person buys this and this person buys this, because there's definitely an application and a user for each line of products. So I've had guys come up and talk to me that, they're going on a sheep hunt in Alaska and they're going to buy the UHDs, and then they buy 2 pairs of Triumphs to keep in the UTVs when they're, driving around the farm. So we try and cover all the bases. And really the thing that we like to be able to do when we're talking to a customer about, maybe they come into a store and their heart is set on buying a Diamondback, 10x42, and they're looking at the Viper 10x42 and they're trying to decide if it's worth that additional, increase in price. We want the customer to be able to see differences in those products so they know what they're getting. So sometimes you'll look at a binocular and you'll say, okay, the big difference here is optical quality. But also when I go and step up here, the binocular now has a magnesium frame and chassis instead of a polymer frame and chassis. So we take it upon ourselves to be able to really show the customer what they're getting for that increase in price. And I think like anything, Dylan, like you see it in golf, you see it in in bikes, you see it in different, it's stuff you use at home. Like, the more a customer spends time behind that glass, the more they're going to see the differences.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like, as a guy who maybe somebody who hunts a couple times a year, they go up to Wisconsin or Kansas deer camp with their family, they're going to hunt 1 or 2 weekends a year. Like, I'll say this, like, that person doesn't need to spend a ton of money because they're not using that product necessarily enough to really see the big differences. And that's if they don't use binoculars any other time in their life. Like, they just use them 2 weekends a year. They're not really an avid outdoorsman, but they do use them and they do have a use for them. So if you were buying golf clubs and you golf 3 days a week, you're going to notice the difference in premium golf clubs more than someone who golfs once a year with their buddies.
Yeah. And that's something, again, and we're going to say outside of the guy you just described, outside of the weekend warrior, to get to camp 1 time, 2 times a year. I believe that optics are one of the single most important pieces of gear for a successful hunt. And, one time I admire everything that I shouldn't say everything. I appreciate everything that Remy Warren says and does. And when he was on the show recently, I asked him, what's your most important piece of gear? And he said optics. And he said, I've even taken it to the point where I would say, if you were to say, Remy, you can hunt buck naked, but you've got optics, versus fully clothed and dressed with no optics, I'm going to be hunting buck naked. Yeah. Optics are so incredibly important. And before you say, well, I'm just sitting in a tree stand, like I'm just, listen, they're still vitally important. I can't tell you how many times, because I had good optics and I could see through the trees and see the buck coming, I was ready and more prepared than if I didn't see him coming. And man, I can't tell you how many stories have you heard about, dude, the deer just popped up right underneath me and I didn't have time to get my bow down and I couldn't shoot him. Well, that's why I'm constantly scanning through the tree lines and seeing what's coming, where are they coming from, what are they doing, are they alone? And so you're more prepared constantly. So optics are just so incredibly important. And if you want to talk out west, it is the importance of optics is magnified substantially. Because you've got to pick apart that mountain. And like you said, you don't understand how good optics are, how bad optics are, until you sit behind them for 9 hours and you're trying to pick apart a mountain. And then you have terrible headaches. Your eyes are strained all day. You're your buddy keeps saying like, well, there's an elk, there's a deer, there's a bear, and you're not seeing any of those things. Might be because you suck at glassing, but it also could be because your glass just isn't good. And there's constant, it's constantly moving and shaking, and you can't really pick apart that mountain and look under every tree and every shadow and every crack. And so you really understand the value of optics. And that's why before you just tune out and don't listen to this episode at all because you're like, well, I've got a pair of binoculars. I just want you to understand what to look for in a pair of binoculars. I want you to understand the importance of binoculars, what you're getting out of glass. So you keep using a term that, optical performance, or how good the actual glass is in an optic. So they stroll into their Cabela's, their Shields, their Bass Pro, their local gun shop, wherever they're looking for a pair of optics at. And, let's take shooting sports out of the picture. We certainly need to have you back on and talk rifle scopes and understanding all of those things. But specifically, bow hunting optics, binoculars, spotters. We can even take rangefinders out of it for now. Binos and spotters. What kind of things are you looking for to realize how good glass is? Because and I'll say this, in a retail store setting, underneath, the big fluorescent lights, correct, most optics look pretty good. You're not going to look through something and be like, oh, I can't even see what's on the wall over there. Most of them look pretty good. So that's why I also would tell people like, hey, if you're going to shop for optics, go to a small town shop, go to a local gun shop that's going to let you look outside. Yeah. That's going to let, Cabela's ain't going to let you stroll outside with the optics, but go to a local gun shop where they'll walk outside with you and let you look through different optics. That being said, what are they looking for as far as quality of glass? Like, how do they know this is good glass?
Well, I think you need to know, first of all, what you're going to do with it. And it can be like something where, one optic could do one job really well. If you're not asking too much of it, it covers 80% of the bases just fine, but it's lacking, in another area. Maybe one type of hunting. Like I'll use the example of like, we'll have a customer who is, 90% of the year they sit in a tree stand in the Midwest and look for deer out on a field or coming through the swamp towards them. And that Diamondback HD, that Viper HD might be perfect for what they need. But then they're going to go on a Coues deer hunt in Arizona, and they're going to be looking at very different background with very different kind of requirements of what the optics do. So I'll break it down a little bit and say, you do need to know what you're using it for, or what the most demanding situation you're going to be using it in, so that you can pick the right optic. But if we were talking like, hey, Dylan, this has got better optical quality, what does that mean? Really what I'm looking at is it's the ability to resolve detail. So resolution, right? Like it's low light performance. Things also like your field of view, that's a physical spec. Like how wide is your field of view? How much magnification does it have? And also things like distortion, and distortion can come in different forms. You could see color distortions. You could see something like chromatic aberration, which would be like, typically in entry level optics, you might see more chromatic aberration. And that's kind of a distortion that happens around high contrast things. So if you looked at a telephone pole against a clear blue sky, that telephone pole might appear to be glowing yellow or purple on the fringes or on the edges. And so that could also be something you see in, the antlers of a deer against a white background. You might see color distortions around that. You could also be looking at things like spherical aberration, which would be like the distortion or the fishbowling of an optic. So I would say most people want an optic with a flatter field of view. And as you go up in optical quality, you tend to be able to get that. A flatter field of view does not have that fishbowling or that distortion around the edges. Commonly, you would hear that's referred to as like edge distortion. So maybe the 80% inside field of view of the optic, most of what you're looking through looks very flat, no distortion, no curvature to the image. But then as you get out on that 20% outer edges of the optic, you might start to see a little bit of a fishbowling effect or that distortion, that rounded appearance to things you're looking at. And so if we were, standing and you were asking me questions and saying, hey, like, what does this optic do for me? And I would ask back, like, what do you need it to do? We would talk about things like clarity, things like your color resolution, your ability to resolve detail at distance. And a lot of times, the farther away we get, the more horsepower we need in the glass to accomplish that goal, to get that clarity, to get that resolution. Low light performance, a lot of times, if you have ever talked to someone that says, like, these are great binoculars, but they just don't do as well in low light, a lot of times we're looking at that maybe not necessarily being the optical quality, but we might look at they picked kind of the wrong magnification or objective combination for what they're actually using it for. So typically looking at like that statistic we would call like exit pupil, which is your objective diameter divided by the magnification. A lot of times the higher the exit pupil of that optic, the brighter the image will appear as you look through it. So if we took a 10x42 and an 8x42 and we compared them, an 8x42 has an exit pupil of 5.25, 42 divided by 8. A 10x42 has an exit pupil of 4.2. And so just comparing those two, I can tell you a few things about those optics. And this is not like comparing a Razor to a Diamondback. This is comparing a Diamondback 10x42 to a Diamondback 8x42. So magnification and your field of view and your objective size, typically, like, the higher the magnification, if we're keeping that objective size the same, the higher the magnification, the narrower your field of view will be. Also, you're looking at the higher the magnification. If we don't change the objective diameter, the dimmer it will appear in low light. And there's other things that can be done in an optical design. Like, we could say that rule is hard and fast, but then as soon as we compare a Viper that has better glass quality to a Diamondback, you might say, like, okay, that Viper 10x42 feels like it performs as good in low light as a Diamondback 8x42. So we don't want to confuse it and say, like, well, one customer has a much higher glass quality in that optic, and so they do see better performance in low light. So we're comparing equals. We're comparing in the same kind of glass quality family. So if we were just saying, like, hey, 10x42 or 8x42, what do I want? Well, the 8x42 is going to appear like it performs better in low light. It's also going to have a wider field of view, which, as you're looking through that optic, it's not going to feel as narrow. It's not going to feel like it's tunneling. I think more often than not, people over magnify with almost all optics, with spotting scopes, with binoculars, with rifle scopes. They over magnify, and we kind of want them to get in the habit of saying, like, okay, let's do optical quality over optical quantity. Let's pick that correct magnification objective combination for my usage. And then if you do so happen to go and do that hunt, I wouldn't want someone to buy a 12x50 if they're hunting swamps in northern Minnesota and their shots are going to be within a couple hundred yards. I wouldn't necessarily want them to buy a 12x50 because they're doing that every year. And they're planning, like, I'm going to go elk hunting someday, so I want to buy this one in case I do go elk hunting. Well, 80% or 90% of the time you use that product, you're going to be using a product that's not optimal for your usage. So we would kind of say, like, buy the right optic for what you do most of the time. And then if you do go do that hunt, that once in a lifetime thing, or that every 5 years, every 10 years thing, you can pick a different optic for that. Now, there's a happy medium, right? Like, not everybody is going to buy two different sets of binoculars, but we would want them to say, like, we do want you to buy the right optic for what you do most of the time. But if we're just comparing those two and say, like, hey, we've got shots inside of a couple hundred yards, I'm not really looking too far. I'm not spotting too far. I would want that customer in a magnification and objective combination that performs the best for them in what they're doing. The other thing
Yeah.
too to think of is a lot of times if we're just talking whitetail hunting from tree stands, aside a few days during the rut, like when is the most deer activity? It's like the first half hour of the day and the last half hour of the day.
Bingo.
That's low light. Like that's when you need that optic to perform the best in low light. Because like you mentioned, when you're in a well-lit environment, most optics look really good side by side. And retailers have figured that out, like make your stores well lit. There's not too many dark corners in the bigger retail stores now because they're so well lit. But pick that optic that's going to perform well in low light if you're hunting in low light a lot, if you need them to perform in low light. So maybe instead of going, oh, that 10x42 looks really good at distance, I don't want to be under magnified. Really what you're doing is you're kind of hamstringing yourself, because what you really need is you need an optic with wider field of view, and you need an optic that performs better in low light. Also think higher magnification tends to feel shakier when you're holding it offhand.
100%.
And so there's a whole bunch of questions we could ask. And ultimately, that's kind of what I want to drill through here is just like, what's the application? What do you need it to do? And then, lay out what those things all mean so that customers can then go and make the right decision for themselves. There's ways around that. If a customer wants they want that magnification of a 10, but they want that low light performance of an 8, you could go to a 10x50, and that would get you close to that exit pupil number. You would be still a little bit under the 8x42, but also you're still dealing with a little bit narrower field of view than an 8x42. So there's trade-offs, and that typically when you go from a 10x42 to a 10x50, there is a little price increase, and they're about an inch longer and a little bit heavier. So optics are definitely a game of trade-offs and compromises, and it's really hard to find that optic that can do everything. But kind of like I said, like maybe that customer looks at that Razor compared to that Viper and they say, well, the Razor 10x42 feels like it performs in low light as well as the Viper does, the 8x42 Vipers. And that simply comes from increasing glass quality and maybe different coating technologies on the lens.
Yeah. Now I will say this, and this is something I have long admired about Vortex for the longest as I can remember, is across all lines, the names are the same. Yep. Like, I mean, if you're looking at rifle scopes, you've got, Diamondbacks. If you're looking at binos, you've got Diamondbacks. If you're looking at spotting scopes, you've got Diamondbacks. So it's really easy to understand kind of the tiers, the brackets of what is higher quality or not. Because, I mean, there's so many times where like somebody will call me and be like, well, what kind of, this should I be looking for? And I'm like, I'm not super familiar with the brand, but Diamondback is about that price range, and I can say that knowing that all of whether they're looking at, again, a rangefinder or a rifle scope or a spotting scope, the names are the same. And I've always admired that, about Vortex. So before we dive into this further, what you just said, like, perfectly defines my optic setup. And I'm not going to talk spotting scopes yet. But I've only got these sitting here. So I will say, I think 8x42s and 10x42s. Like if somebody just calls me like, I just need a really good pair of binoculars. Like I'm not going to buy 7 different pair of binoculars. I'm either going to tell you an 8x42 or a 10x42. But what you just said paints my scenario perfectly. If I'm sitting in a whitetail stand, I want 8x42s. Because again, you're looking at first light, you've got a deer coming in and okay, he's at 100. By the time he gets here, it's going to be shooting light. So I'm already trying to pick that deer apart. Like, is this a deer I want to shoot? So I want the very best and low light that I can get. So 8x42s are what's on my chest in the whitetail woods. But what's on my chest, the other 300 days a year I'm not in the whitetail woods, is a pair of 10x42s. The reason I say, like, these are my everyday runners. And the reason I say that is because I want them in my chest. If I'm shooting at 100 yards and I just want to see arrows where they're at, I want a little bit more magnification.
And when you go to 8, and then you go to 8 power to 10 power, that's a 25% increase in magnification. So it's substantial.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you're going
It
up
doesn't
by
seem that
2.
high.
So
Yeah, I guess you're right. Man, that's why you're here. Like, again, most of the time I've got a pair of 10x42s on my chest. Now, I do whitetail hunt more than anything else. But again, I'm saying like for every day, just out shooting, doing whatever, I've got 10x42s on my chest. In the whitetail woods, I've got a pair of 8x42s. But for everything out west, if I'm going on now that's not to say like, I mean, if I know if I know I'm going to be in much bigger country and I really got to reach out there, I might go bigger, but not very often at all. Because I also, and we'll get into this, my kind of kit, my optics kit, I run a very compact spotter. I've never been a big spotter guy. I hate big spotters. They just take up room in your pack. They're heavy. They're bulky. You find yourself, you don't even want to get it out. Like you realize like, man, I should really sit behind the spotter for a while, but you're like, hey, it's just, I don't even want to try to dig it out of there and get it out. So I'm a compact spotter guy. So I use my spotter a lot because it's really easy, quick, accessible, small, light. So I don't find myself running big binoculars, even in situations where some people would run bigger ones. 10x42, pretty much everything outside of whitetail hunting. And then I dropped to an 8x42 for whitetail hunting for that exact reason. They just perform better in low light. So I haven't really ran through this at all since I came to Vortex. I'm running the Razor 10x42s, which I love the glass. I love the quality of the glass. I love the last binos I was running did not have a tripod adapter, which there's not, again, because I run a small spotter, there's not many times I put my binos on a tripod, but there are times where I'm like, man, I really wish I could put these on a tripod. Just a really good pair of binos, man. And I mean, since I'm telling my rundown, and this is a relatively newer scope for you guys. Am I right? The compact Razor.
Yeah. It came out year before last.
13x39x56. And this is the Razor as well. Now I'll go ahead and say it. I, for a long time, said the Kowa 55 was the best compact spotter you could buy. I love that spotter. I ran that spotter religiously for years, whether I was putting it on a truck window or sitting on a tripod. And I had tons of dudes who ran that. Tons of guys that I trusted in the industry that ran that spotter, and just a really good spotter. And when you guys dropped this, I was super intrigued. Because it is hard to achieve good glass in such a compact spotter. I mean, if you've looked through compact spotters before, they can be rough sometimes. And so I was very intrigued. And I finally got to play with one. And honestly, this spotter is one of the main reasons I decided, okay, Vortex is where I'm going. Because when they introduced the small spotter that I could really get behind, then I knew I could run them for good. And this spotter is very, very good. I've fallen in love with this thing. It is a touch lighter than the Kowa. It has a removable eyepiece. The Kowa did not. So, I mean, again, not that you couldn't pack this anywhere you needed to anyways, but if you're running a really lean pack and a small pack and you needed to fit it in the front pocket or the water bottle holder,
the straight configuration of that little spotter is about the size of a 20-ounce bottle of Coke.
Mm-hmm. So even if you're if you're running a super lean system, you can slide this in your Nalgene holder on your pack. So the Kowa did not have a removable eyepiece. So again, that's a part where this wins, in my opinion, because if I do need to just make it really, really compact, you can. I don't run a straight eyepiece. I'll go ahead and touch on that for a minute, just because then you have to get I like just sitting over the glass a little more and bringing my head to it rather than having to bring it all the way up and get behind it. That personal preference, like that really doesn't mean anything to, I could care less if you like a straight or an angled. I just like, kind of bringing it up and getting over it, more comfortable, for me if you're sitting there for hours. But for a lot of guys, straight's more comfortable. So
yeah, I think one definitive thing where a straight has its challenges is like glassing uphill.
100%.
You got to get down lower, or you need to get the spotter higher than your standard.
But the same could be said for glassing downhill.
True.
With this. Yep. So again, trade-offs in every way. I do like a straight, not that I don't buy multiple spotters, especially not for a truck spotter. But if I am on the window of my truck, I like a straight because it just kind of comes up right next to you. You don't have to get over. You don't have to move your body as much or move your head as much. You can just bring your window right up and you're just kind of sitting in your truck looking. So if I was going to buy a dedicated truck spotter, it would be a straight. But so that's kind of and again, I run a very light optic system, which is why I like a light spotter. And Vortex, in my opinion, finally somebody dethroned Koa in the compact spotter. Right. And I had heard that. I had heard from other guys that it performed really well. We actually, so at the Pope and Young convention, we have a national field judging competition. And there's a bunch of tripods with a bunch of glass on it. And I was walking by one day and I noticed that there was a Koa 55 and this Razor. And I was like, man, I want to get by and compare those, and just didn't have time. And we're sitting around that night after the convention was over, and I'm talking to a lot of dudes that I trust, like Remy, Alan Bolin, dudes that kill world records. Yep. And so I trust these guys immensely, and they were talking this thing up, and I'm like, well, maybe maybe it's worth looking into. And so it certainly was. I actually ran the idea of this spotter behind Matzinger not too long ago. And he was like, dude, that's one of my favorite optics ever made. And so again, I just started hearing from guys that I really trust about this optic, and it's performed. So now, what would you say to the guy? When would you say to somebody that they should go bigger in the spotting scope area?
Well, a little bit like we talked on binoculars. Binoculars have that kind of fixed exit pupil, right? They're not variable power. The spotting scope, you're going to a variable power optic. So that 13 to 39 has an exit pupil a little bit different, or the low light performance changes a little bit as you increase magnification, right? So as you go up in magnification, it will not feel like it's performing as well in low light. That's kind of across the board with any variable power optic. That's why a lot of times you see people backing down the magnification in lower light on a rifle scope, on a spotting scope. It's because it's giving you a little bit better performance as you go lower in magnification. So if you're someone who needs to use a spotting scope at long distance, like higher magnification, so that spotter you got, that's a 13 to 39. The next step up in the Razor line would be a 22 to 48. And then the next step above that would be a 27 to 60. And in the 60 power, the objective is 85 millimeters. In the 48,
which is massive,
the 22 to 48,
so if you don't know,
it's a 65 objective. And that one, correct me if I'm wrong, but that one's a 56. And so,
yes,
if you need to look at higher magnification, right? So that 13 to 39 and that 22 to 48 probably look really similar in terms of low light performance when they're on the lowest power. But as soon as you dial that 13 to 39 up to say 22 power, if you set that next to the 22 to 48 on 22 power, that 22 to 48 will look like it's a brighter image. So if you're looking for detail at longer distances, needing more magnification in low light, that's one reason to go to one of those larger spotters with a bigger objective diameter. It's going to perform better at higher magnification in low light. So that's one thing. You also typically see the more you're looking for detail, so the longer like you're looking through the optic, higher magnification optics will strain your eye a little bit more, right? Like the field of view gets narrow as you run them on higher power. So if you wanted to have, an optic and you're running that 13 to 39 at the highest power, the field of view will look considerably narrower than that 22 to 48 or that 27 to 60 on 20 power, on 30 power, right? So you just kind of keep in mind, like, the higher you're going to run the magnification, the more you'll appreciate the bigger spotter. Not only because you're not, you can max that 27 to 60 out at 60 power, and you'll feel that same like tunneling field of view. You'll feel the lower light performance isn't as good, but you can dial that thing back to 30 power and you'll be at almost the lowest magnification it can go, which is the place where it's performing at the highest level. So kind of think like the more you're looking at high magnification in low light, if you're looking for detail, like if you're just looking to see if those are elk or cows, like cattle, like that lower magnification spotter will typically do the trick. But if you're trying to decide like, okay, there's an hour left in the day, I need to decide if I'm going to go after this bull over here or I'm going after this bull over here. And you're looking for differences in antler size, or you're looking for differences in body size. Like the more detail you want, the more that higher magnification optic will do for you.
Yeah. And I will say this, when we're talking about optics and what to look for, we're also not speaking to the guy, like we're not speaking to the Alan Bolins and the Jason Matzingers who are looking for 8-7 inch, like who are, and Alan, like if you follow Alan, he's on his sheep hunt right now and he's literally going for new world records. Like he's looking for 8-7 inch and he's looking for, he wants to count on the curls. And so it's like, we're taking that out of the picture.
Sure.
We're talking your everyday to your advanced bow hunters.
Yeah.
Now, what do you encourage guys to do if they want to run a more compact spotter? Where should their binos fall? If they want to run a bigger spotter, where should their binos fall? Because the way I look at it is I can use these 10x42s to tell if those are elk or if those are cattle.
Yeah.
And then if I really, like you said, now if I'm going to spend time kind of picking this apart, like, okay, this looks like there's bears in here. Let's pick it apart. I'll drop the spotter on a tripod and then I can kind of go slower, look, through more details. And then, like you said, say there is a bull over here, there's a bull over here. I can crank that to 39 and knowing I'm not looking through this for a long time. Like I'm not scanning the mountain through this. I can pick apart those horns a little, with details at 39. So I can get by with a smaller spotter and maybe go up a little bit in binos.
Yep.
That being said, like where do you how should the two work together as far as sizing goes?
Well, I think almost everybody who hunts, regardless of, maybe kind of filtering out a few very specific situations where size, weight, counting growth rings, like all that stuff really starts to come into play. I think most people could get by really well with an 8x42 bino and a 12x50 bino. Like if you're someone who is going to have two binoculars, those are the ones to get, in my opinion, an 842 and a 1250. That's what my kit is. I've got 842s for tree stand bow hunting, for looking over a farm field from a box blind during rifle season, that kind of stuff. Like I've probably got my 842s most of the time. My out west setup, I've got a set of 12x50s that typically are going to either be tripod mounted or they're going to be used on a rest, something stable, a car window mount, something like that. The 1250s are probably what I'm scanning with if I'm like picking apart a hillside, picking apart a mountain, picking apart a river valley. Like if I'm looking at that through a set of 12x50s, a lot of people would go, you either have binos or a spotting scope. I'm probably doing most of my scanning through binos. It's less fatiguing on your eyes. The field of view feels more natural as you're looking through them, and you don't get that kind of that magnification in one eye and natural magnification in the other eye kind of headache as you do that. But looking, if you've got these binos, what spotting scope should you get? I think, and this is, again, it gets a little more complicated when you start to say, well, that's a great idea, but I don't have room in my pack for a full-size spotting scope. Or that's a great idea, but I can only take one optic with me. But what I would say is probably if you're doing more scanning with like a set of 12 by 50 binos, we make some 15 by 56s as well. And even 18 by 56, I would say those are kind of a specialty niche. Like those 15s and 18s are more someone who's glassing long distance all day, not necessarily like mid-range stuff. So they want to glass in the same way they would use a spotting scope, but they're just looking a lot farther. But I would say if you have a set of 1250s for scanning, or even 1042s for scanning, if you're in that 1250 and you go to a 13 by 39 spotting scope, that 13 power spotting scope on the low end is virtually the same magnification as your binoculars.
Yeah, no
so there's not a big difference. If you're going, okay, I'm going to buy one pair of binoculars and they need to cover my whitetail tree stand hunting, scouting for waterfowl, everything I do all the time. And then they also need to be able to be in my pack when I go hunt out west or bigger wide open spaces. Then I'm going to say you're probably going like a lower magnification spotting scope because it's more versatile. It can fit in your pack. It has enough magnification if you need it. But I would say what tends to happen for me is like, I'll carry our 8x32 UHDs or our 8x42 Razors or Vipers. In that kit, I've probably got like the 12 to 36 or the 11 to 33, the micro spotters, the Viper, that series, that 11 to 33 Viper and an 8x42 Viper are a really good combination. But if you've got a pair of 12s, whether it be Diamondback, Vipers, Razors, whatever, I would probably, if size and weight aren't a concern, I would probably get into a mid magnification spotting scope, like either a 16 to 48, a 22 to 48. That 20 to 60 by 85 or that 27 to 60 by 85 spotter is a physically big spotting scope, and they take up a lot of space and they're relatively heavy compared to other stuff in your kit. So it's a commitment to bring one of those out. But if you're glassing from a truck, from a UTV, from your living room window where size and weight aren't necessarily a concern, I would say that customer usually is running a set of 12s or 15 pair power binoculars, and they're just using that spotting scope to get detail on a target. Now, keep in mind, like we could say you could use that 27 to 60 or 20 to 60 spotting scope to get detail on something 500 or 1,000 yards away. But if you're glassing 2 miles away, that spotting scope can give you a similar field of view to using a pair of binoculars. So
that's what I was going to ask you. Like, so let's actually give some distances here. So if the person's planning on we'll start with whitetail. If they're planning on looking at deer from 100 to 300, like what size should they go with? It a little bit depends on what level of detail you want to get, right? Like, I think most people, and again, there's exceptions, but I think most people that do tree stand whitetail hunting, an 8 power is enough to get you enough detail, right? You use them in the woods. You know that like at 100 yards, I can tell if this is okay, I need to get my bow down, or I'm going to leave my bow hanging up. Like, at that distance, you can tell with a pair of 8s, with a pair of 6s, with a pair of 10s. Like, that's not a long distance to look. When we start getting out 300 to 400 yards, that 8 power, I think, still performs really well. But maybe if you need to know more detail, like there's a difference between rifle season here in Wisconsin, the distances I'm going to shoot, and archery season. That's obvious. Like, I may want to have a pair of 10s or a pair of 12s if I need to see that detail at 400 or 500 yards. So at 400 yards, at 400 yards, you got a deer with 8s versus 10s versus 12s.
Yep.
What are the differences in detail you can see? Like with 8s, can you count tines?
Like 400 yards?
Yeah.
Well, it would make something feel at 400 yards, a power of 8 power binoculars would make something feel or look about the same as around 50 yards with the naked eye. So some of that depends on your vision. Like, can you see that at 50 yards? Can you count that detail at 50 yards with the naked eye? If so, then yeah, like you would see that detail through the binoculars at that distance. 10 powers would make it feel, like 40 yards away with the naked eye. So a little bit of it depends on your eye's ability to resolve detail. But a lot of it boils down to just how much detail are you looking for. I think inside of 400 or 500 yards, a pair of 8s, you would not be left, wanting more.
Yeah.
And that question, Dylan, too, like that question goes like, are you going to have 2 pairs of binoculars or 3 pairs of binoculars? If not, if you're saying this is my 1 pair of binoculars, I'm going to use it for rifle season and archery season, I would probably say, okay, like the 8s are better for your archery season, but since you're going to use this for everything, I would have that customer buy a pair of 10s.
Yeah.
And then if you said, okay, I like the 10s, but I need to use them in low light. Okay, let's go with a 10x50 because that's going to perform a little better in low light. So there's like kind of a path of questions for every end user, and that leads to a different suggestion for a product.
Now, what's the physical size difference in weight between 10x42s, 10x50s?
It's typically about an inch longer. That comes from the objective, and you'll see it on the objective lens. So it'll typically be around an inch longer. I'm speaking to our binoculars. I'm not speaking, to the market as a whole.
Yeah, correct.
But typically, like you would see, it's about an inch longer in the body and then a couple ounces heavier.
So not terrible.
Not terrible, but there's so many bino pack manufacturers now, like the chest packs, and a lot of them fit like the standard size bino pack you buy in the store fits a 10x42 or an 8x42 perfectly. And then add an inch, and that 1050 sometimes doesn't allow the hinge to close or the top cover to close. So it's enough where some of the gear isn't compatible when you buy these specialty packs, whether it be a Badlands or an FHF or an Alps, or go down a Eberly stock, like you go down the list of these packs that people have access to now. The difference between a 1042 and a 1050 sometimes is enough where that kit isn't compatible.
If you are a traditional archer, then you are probably familiar with Three Rivers Archery. If you are an aspiring traditional archer, you've probably heard of Three Rivers Archery. And if you are even curious about traditional archery or hope to do it one day, you need to become familiar with Three Rivers Archery. Why? Because Three Rivers Archery is a wealth of knowledge on all things traditional archery. You can call those guys up, whether you're going to buy from them or not, and ask them any question under the sun, and they'll be able to help you. From spining of arrows to weights of broadheads to string links to AMO links, any question in between, tuning a bow, they are there to help you. They also sell everything you could ever dream of needing when being a traditional archer, from bows and arrows, broadheads, tabs, gloves, strings, stringers, cases, display racks. If it has to do with traditional archery, Three Rivers has it, and they know about the product. So you can call them and ask them any kind of question, and they're there to help you. They are the single largest distributor of all things traditional archery. They offer same-day shipping. They are phenomenal. Guys, if you are a traditional archer or you've ever even wanted to look in traditional archery, Three Rivers Archery is your place to go for all things traditional archery. But speaking of harnesses, like, it's to me impressive that Vortex sends you a harness with your binos. Like, that's cool, man. And I mean, again, if you're looking at budget, like, that's something to consider. It's something to consider to say, well, if I buy these, then I still have to spend, $150, $200 on a harness. If I buy these, I might be spending a little more, but then I don't have to spend the 150 on a Alaska Guy Creations or a like that. That to me is really cool.
And we kind of treat that like, that standard glass pack that comes with them is not fancy. Again, it's very durable. It's very rugged. It's not going to break on you, but it's not super feature rich. So it doesn't have zippered pockets. It doesn't have, a fleece or felt liner. Like, it doesn't have a bunch of attachments or a way to attach things, but out of the box, it gets you something. It does have a neck strap. It does have a chest harness that allows you to mount it in that pack and keep it safe, keep it protected and accessible when you need it. We also have our glass pack pros and the sport glass packs, which start to increase more of the features that you get. But the one thing that we always try to do with every pair of binoculars at least includes some sort of chest harness or carrying case for them. That's great for us. It means the binoculars will be protected more often. Again, like I was saying, we don't want you to have to use the warranty, but if you do, we're going to try and knock it out of the park in terms of service and, go above and beyond as much as we can. But it is something that it's nice, especially if you're like, I have enough to buy the binos today, but I don't have enough to buy this pack that I want. It gets you through that interim period where you're not leaving them unprotected or inaccessible to you.
For sure. And I don't think you might not be comprehending what Vortex does. If I run over these with my pickup, if I forget where they're at and back over them and crush them, Vortex replaces them. Like, to me, that is the defining difference between Vortex and everyone else, is that, I understand that like this is an investment and this is something that costs some money. But to know like, well, I never have to spend it again. Like this is a one-time buy because Vortex has my back. Like that gives the shopper peace of mind, and it should give you peace of mind.
As long as you don't lose them, like we just need a piece. We just need a piece of them. Like even if you got part of them, like you run over them with a truck, you don't need to send us all the pieces. We just need some of the pieces. But our way of looking at that is like, it's a one-time purchase. Now, if you decide you want to get a different optic that has different features or quality, like, of course, that's a separate purchase. But like, if you go into the store and you buy that 1042 Diamondback, you won't have to buy it again. You won't have to buy it again, whether you break it, like I said, every year we have customers who will just send their binoculars in for a full cleaning. They use them in dusty, dirty, muddy environments. Like they just want them top to bottom clean through. We do that as a part of the warranty as well. So if you're listening and you've got a pair of binoculars that need some love, the VIP warranty covers that as well. They don't need to be broken for you to send them in.
That's cool, man. All right. So run me through binoculars. How do you, and I do have another question on choosing sizing, but it's a little bit of a different question. Where should people run their eye cups at and why?
Well, our eye cups are all adjustable because people have different facial structure, right? So to start, that center hinge allows you to adjust for the proper interpupillary distance, which is the distance between your eyes. Everyone's facial structure is different. So we try and make it so that you can adjust the eye cups to the right eye relief based on your facial structure. So like I typically will run my binoculars almost all the way out. For some reason, that's how they fit my face the best. If I'm wearing glasses, and anyone who wears glasses, you typically run them all the way in. Binoculars will have an eye relief. And when I say eye relief, I mean the distance your eye needs to be from that piece of glass to see a full field of view, but not to be too close where that field of view becomes too sensitive to your movement. And you don't want to be too far away that you don't see the full field of view. So it'll be somewhere between, I'll use millimeters and then inches, but like 16 millimeters to 24 millimeters, somewhere in there. So like your eye would be somewhere between 3/4 of an inch and an inch away from the glass. Adjust those eye cups, whether you have glasses or not, to the point where your eye is somewhere around 3/4 of an inch to an inch away from the glass. That's the best way to kind of say it. But of course, everyone's facial structure is different. So maybe someone without glasses, one person uses them with the eye cups all the way in and someone uses them with all the way out. Like it just depends on facial structure. But as you're setting them up, set your eye cup to the point where you see a full field of view, but you're not so close that the field of view is sensitive and winks out on you when you move behind the glass.
Yeah, that's good. Now, explain to people why they have these two different knobs that can turn. You've got your main knob, and then you've got this one behind the eyepiece. It amazes me, like when you talk to somebody and they have no idea, like their binos constantly stay a little bit blurry because they've never set the focus rings.
Right.
So how do these two correlate with each other?
Well, your center focus wheel is what adjusts the focal distance of the binocular. So it allows you to adjust items or objects into focus based on their distance away from you. So if you have something at 10 yards away, your center focus wheel setting will be different than if it was 100 yards away. So that focus wheel, that center focus wheel, adjusts the whole image for your eyes into focus. The right eye diopter, which is, if you don't mind holding those up, Dylan, on the right eye, there is a locking diopter ring on those binoculars. And what that does is it allows you to adjust for the differences in natural magnification of your eyes. I know we all think that we see exactly one power, but most people's eyes have a little bit of a different magnification, natural magnification between the two eyes. And so what that allows you to do is so if we're talking a 10 power pair of binoculars, if you're looking through that left eye, which is not adjustable, you're just using the center focus wheel for clarity in that eye. I would tell you like how to set it up. I would tell you, looking through the left eye only, look at something about 50 yards away. So either cover or close your right eye, and then just use the center focus wheel to bring that object into clarity. Now, using the right eye diopter, that adjustment ring on the right eye, close your left eye and just the right eye, adjust that until the image is clear. And if you look on that, there are laser engraved markings on there that one side says negative and one side says positive, and then there's a 0 in the middle that indicates a central setting, a medium setting, which is, that's if you're adjusting your right eye diopter and that's on 0, that kind of tells you your eyes have about the same natural magnification. And so some people, you'll see that diopter adjustment on the right is way over to the negative side, which would mean that your right eye has more magnification than your left eye. And if it's way over on the positive side, it would mean that your left eye has more magnification than your right eye. So you're trying to bring both eyes to the natural, to the same magnification, which in a 10 power would be 10 power. But it's giving you the ability. It's not that images don't necessarily look clear. It's that you don't create a singular flat image in the binocular when your eyes are at different magnifications.
Right. And once you set that, like, you never have to change it again. It's not like,
I mean,
okay,
maybe
there's a deer
every few years you would check it.
Right,
like,
right. But I mean, like,
changed.
It's not like, oh, there's a deer at 50. I have to close this eye focus. I have to pop this open focus, which is why it locks. Like, you pull it up, you focus it, and then you lock it back down. That doesn't change, because now I know no matter how far the animal is, my eyes are set to be the same.
Yep.
So, like, I set this out of the box, and I'm not going to change it. Like you said, I'll check it maybe every couple years. Now, does this have anything to do, and this might be a stupid question. If it is, just say that's a stupid question. Let's move on. Does this have anything to do with eye dominancy? Like, if I'm left eye dominant, will it be more or less magnified? If I'm right eye dominant, will it be more or less magnified? I mean,
typically,
does that make sense?
Not in my experience. I don't typically see that. It from what I know about it and my experience is that it has almost everything to do with just the natural magnification of your eyes, and you're trying to bring them into the same
Yeah.
You might actually, like, this would be interesting to see, but you might see that, like, if you were setting your diopter to 0, like it's a middle setting, meaning your eyes have relatively you may actually have something where it's like that person may tend to be more like, I wouldn't say ambidextrous in the sense of using your hands for something, but like you may see that person tend to have more flexibility. Like if they shoulder a rifle on their left shoulder, they might not have as many problems looking through that rifle scope with their left eye, if they were naturally right-handed.
That makes sense.
But I've not really researched that at all, so I couldn't tell you exactly. But that would be my guess.
Well, the reason I ask is because like I am so incredibly left eye dominant, it's not even funny. Mm-hmm. And on every pair of binoculars I've ever ran, the right eye is less magnified. I have to lower the magnification. Sure. So I didn't know if that was like had any correlation to like, well, this, the left eye is more magnified or that's why I'm left eye dominant, because it's more magnified, or I was just curious.
I definitely have a fascination like with how eyes see things through optics. It's something that like it fascinates me. It intrigues me, but I couldn't tell you like the science behind that. Right. Now I've got something else to research.
Yeah, there you go. Now, I want to ask you, like, now that I'm getting the wife out hunting, the kids, my boy loves looking through binoculars, and we just went on a bear hunt. My son went with me, and like on the way back, like we're seeing all these antelope, all these elk, like, and I'm, I would pull over and give him the binoculars, and like I understand to an extent. It's like, okay, he's 6, like he doesn't understand how they work. Is there a size like that works better for kids? Like is there a size where kids can acquire what they're trying to look at easier?
I think for sure. I think the biggest thing,
smaller, right?
I've got 4 kids. My wife and I have 4 kids. They're 3, 5, 7, and 9. They each have our Bantam youth binoculars. And the biggest thing that I've noticed with younger kids looking through binoculars is that they have a hard time understanding, like, okay, I see something over there. Now I'm going to bring the binoculars to my eye and look at it. Like there's not as much coordination when they're trying to initially find something. So at least my younger kids have a harder time doing that. So what you kind of want is you want a wide field of view. And like we talked before, magnification and field of view, kind of like the higher magnification, the narrower the field of view, and vice versa. And so our youth binoculars are 6.5 power. And so with that, you see an incredibly wide field of view, which makes it easier for them to find things they're looking for.
Yeah. That's something like
I failed to mention this earlier. Like the wider the field of view, typically the binocular will feel like it's less sensitive to movement. So if you're using it offhand, a lower magnification, wider field of view feels less shaky offhand.
And that's, to go back to your point where you said you run 12 by 50s. That's the reason I don't, because I don't put my binoculars on a tripod as often. So I don't want it to be shaky. And not that, you could definitely run 12 by 50s just offhand, but that's why I don't go that big, because I don't find myself very often at all pulling out a tripod to put my binos on them.
Sure.
Again, unless like I'm running a super lean kit and I don't have a spotter with me and I really need to try it as hard as I can to look for something in this sagebrush or whatever, then I would, but it's just so rare. And so I like running 10s a lot more than 12s, offhand. And so
I mentioned it a little bit earlier too. We were talking about, what do you get as you go up in price, or what do you get as you change the tier of binoculars you're using? There can be optical, I guess, challenges overcome. And I don't want to say when you throw money at it, but when you increase the features and the overall quality set of the kit you're using. And so like in a 1250, I run our UHD 12 by 50s because they feel to me like they actually feel like I'm looking through a 10 by 42.
Right.
But with
that makes
added
sense.
magnification. And so it's not everybody that's going to do that. But if you were looking for, okay, why does that UHD line cost what it costs? Well, they use a different type of prism than our standard binoculars, than all of the other binoculars do, which helps overcome some of those things that happen, those things in physics that happen when you increase magnification. So that it's a Abbey Koenig prism instead of like a standard, like a Schmidt-Pecken prism. So you do see that, like some of those, I would call them features, but things that can be overcome as you're able to pay for them.
What's the best binoculars for driving down the highway with? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's incredibly dangerous. I like trying it every once in a while, but you don't do it when the wife's with you because she freaks out.
Right. Or if you're a passenger,
I get car sick.
It's kind of fun.
And I get car sick really easy. So
flip them around, have negative. It's a trip.
Yeah. Well, that's the only, like when you're, on a road trip on a hunt, like you get really bored, and that's you just find yourself, you're like, I wonder how long I can drive without having to pull the binoculars down. Anyways, probably shouldn't promote that.
Yeah.
Is there one outlier? Like, is there one thing where you would say like, okay, well, if you're hunting this, or if you're going to be in this type of terrain, like throw out everything we've said, and this is what you need to know?
One product or one,
maybe it's the pursuit of one animal, or the pursuit of any animal in a certain region, or if you were to say like, okay, everything we've just said like is good information unless you're coos deer hunting, or unless you're going on a sheep hunt, or unless you're hunting in the Brooks Range, or unless you're in the desert. I mean, is there anything like outlier wise where you're like, okay, let's touch on this real quick because it would be a little different in this scenario?
I could think of a couple examples of that. Like I would maybe use a set of 15 power binoculars a couple times in very specific situations. Like, like typically, like I was mentioning, like the higher magnification, the more optical quality you're going to want. I've had really good luck, especially if we're not talking about like low light scenarios. Like you can get by with a lot more if you're hunting with adequate lighting. And so maybe something like a 12 by 50 hunting in the Midwest, a Diamondback 12 by 50, maybe something like that wouldn't be the binocular I'd take out to glass mountains. But like if I'm looking at, if I'm waterfowl scouting and I drive up and I'm 100 yards away or 200 yards away, like that 12 by 50 Diamondback does everything I need it to do, especially since I'm out scouting during the day, looking at ponds. Like I'm not necessarily doing that early morning, late evening. I'm out in the middle of the day. There's a ton of sunlight. Like there's plenty of light. I can see enough detail. And so to say, like, I wouldn't tell a customer like, hey, if you want a 12 by 50, you need to spend $1,000 or more. Like that's not true, because there's applications where that product at a really good price does everything that customer needs to do. Same with spotting scopes. Like we've got a lot of awesome customers that are big into waterfowl, in the Dakotas, all the way down Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, like all the way down the Central Flyway, that like they'll use a $200 or $250 spotting scope, because they're not looking 2 miles away. Like they're not looking at something that far. They're looking at something a couple hundred yards away and they get plenty of detail. You could say the same thing about like a premium product, where it's like, we might sell a very small number of 15 or 18 power premium binoculars, but for that customer who's like, I can take one optic, I can't take a spotting scope and a binocular, that 15 power is great, because they're not concerned about something popping up, 150 yards away and having too narrow of a field of view. They're looking at something across canyon or across, a valley. And so that product, where you might look at it and go, Dylan would say, I have no use for a pair of 15 by 56 binoculars. For that customer that's going on that sheep hunt or going on that that once in a lifetime experience, like that might be the product for them. And we could look at that and say, well, it might not perform as well in low light because it has a super high magnification, but that might also, like, they might not necessarily be as concerned about low light as you and I are sitting in a tree stand in the woods. So there's definitely outliers in the lines. Like I wouldn't say it goes against physics, like the science of light, but it definitely goes against some of those like talking points when we're trying to help a customer get into the right optic. They might say, by the way, I'm using it for this. And I might have a totally different recommendation based on that one niche that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I got one more question, but to put a bow on selecting your optics. For the general guy, like he's hunting whitetails, maybe he's going to go out west sometimes, but I mean, you got to remember whitetails are king. So there's so many guys that are just strictly hunting whitetails, and they want a good pair of binoculars. You're going to tell 90% of the whitetail hunting public that, hey, I would buy 8x42s.
I would say if they're buying one pair of binoculars and they're going to use them just for archery, I would probably say 8x42s, I would say 8x42s. If they're going to be a crossover and they're going to be rifle hunting, or maybe they hunt in a straight wall state or something like that, like looking at detail out to a couple hundred yards, I would say the 10x42s. And if they say, okay, I need this dual pair that covers me for rifle shots and archery shots, but I really need them to be good in low light, I would say 10x50.
That's a good recap. And that's why, like, again, that's why 90% of the time you're finding 10x42s in my pack. Because even in Kansas, like even if I am bow hunting in Kansas, I might see deer 400 yards away. Like, I might be seeing deer that I'm not going to have a chance to shoot them for an hour and a half.
Well, that's like the key is like, what can I do with that information? If you have a rifle in your hand, you can do a lot with that information. And so that information becomes more powerful. And if you have that 10 power versus an 8 power, you can make that decision based on the information you got. But if you're like, and the reason why I say like 8s for whitetail archery stuff, or really any archery stuff, as long as you're not spot and stock, is because an 8 gives you enough magnification to make a decision at the distances that you need to make a decision at.
Right.
If you're not going to climb out of that stand and go stalk that animal, like an 8's going to give you enough information to make any decision I think you need to make.
Yeah. I would agree with that. The only reason I make decisions a little further away, because I'm an aggressive caller, even when it comes to whitetails, and I'm an aggressive decoy user. I love decoying whitetails. So I might be making a decision where, okay, I see a buck at 250 yards over there, but there's a buck at, 100 over here. Like, do I verbally want to get aggressive to try and call the deer in at 100, knowing that I very well might be calling this buck in as well, and they might, I might deter the two because of each other.
Right.
That type of,
or they might
kind
draw
of
each other away further away than you.
Right. Kind of rare scenario, if you will, but I've made the mistake. I mean, I've been calling to a deer over here. Actually, like, picture perfect example in Oklahoma. There was a deer over here and a deer over here, and I wanted to call to this buck, and I thought he had gotten far enough away and kind of lost enough attention on this side to where he wasn't going to respond. And so I start calling to this buck, and sure enough, the other one heard as well, wrote back around. They went around me and fought each other and then just dispersed. And I'm like, well, that didn't work. Crap. Got to see a cool fight, but it didn't work. So yeah, I kind of, again, and that's kind of I don't even want to say niche, but more of a rare situation. Like, that doesn't happen often.
But it's definitely
but for me,
part of your decision-making process though. And kind of like a lot of this conversation is like, we're trying to ask the right questions. We're not necessarily just telling someone like, oh, well, there's a difference here and you spend more and you get better glass. It's not really the case where that covers most customers' needs.
Right.
And so when we kind of have a mindset of like, okay, optics give you information, right? What can you do with that information? And then kind of what you just told me, like, well, I can decide if I'm going to call to those animals or not. That's the information. That's the decision that I make with the information I have. And so we'll need the appropriate optic to give us that information. And that's really what it boils down to, is if a customer is looking at a specific application and saying, here's what I want, here's what I do, and here's the decision I have to make, we can help you get the right optic that provides that, that appropriate level of detail to make that decision.
Or even the area you're hunting in. Like, again, in Kansas, even bow hunting, I can run a 10 because it's wide open. Like, and even if I am in the timber, it's not thick, crazy timber. Yep. Like, low light doesn't become near of an issue if I am in, the North Maine woods, like chasing bears, like where low light is, it's low light for 2 hours before legal shooting light's over. So, like, yeah, I mean, I don't find myself even deer hunting. I don't find myself losing the ability to see in low light because I'm hunting wide open wheat fields, or even where I hunt in Oklahoma, wide open terrain in Oklahoma where low light doesn't play much of a factor. However, I like an 8 and kind of what I talked to before, because I'm trying to pick through trees and where it might get darker in the shadows and try to see those deer coming before they get to me. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's all a game of understanding. It's all a game of understanding what do I need out of my optics. Now, that being said, I've kind of walked through selecting a size, figuring out what size you should go with. Do you have any tips for just the best optics use? How to get the most out of your optics? My tip, and I'll share this while you think about it, my tip is simply use them. Like, it doesn't matter what binos you've got in your pack if they're not put to your face. Like, that's my tip. Before, like, if I'm walking into a whitetail sit in an evening, I'm scanning the field. Like, when I get out of the truck, I'm scanning the field to know, like, okay, am I going to blow any deer out before I get in there? I'm scanning the tree line as I get to my tree stand to know, okay, well, there might be a bedded buck by my stand right now. Like, and if I bust in there, I'm just going to blow them out. Like, so optics are only as good as the amount of time you use them. So it doesn't matter if you drop $1,000 on optics if you never put them to your face. Like, so that's my biggest tip, is just be looking through your optics, be using them.
Yep.
Again, if I'm just sitting in the tree, I'm not just sitting there waiting for a deer to come. I've got my optics and I'm scanning the woods to see if there's a deer coming, to see if there's a deer skirting the creek bottom that I can call to, that I never would have known was even in the area had I not been using my optics. So put the optics to your face, use them. If you're out west, before you bomb down into a canyon, scan that canyon to make sure there's no bulls down in there. Before you just bail off and, well, I don't see any bears over here, just take time and scan it real quick and make sure, okay, I didn't miss that bear laying in the shade over there. So use your optics is my tip. I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but I can't tell you how many times, like, I've been on a hunt with a dude and I'm like, I've never seen you pull your optics out.
Yeah.
What do you have those for? Like, I've never seen you stop and look at that hillside before we go. And so that's my biggest tip, is just use your optics.
Well, my biggest tip, when we're talking binos, spotting scopes, when you're glassing, let's just say, and it kind of is one of those things where maybe I overdo this, but if I'm glassing, let's just say I'm sitting on an ag field, or I'm sitting in the woods somewhere and I'm glassing stuff, 50 yards away to 200 yards away to 400 yards away. And I'm looking from close to far or far to close. Dylan, I'm on my focus wheel the whole time. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're like hunting in the woods and you've got, okay, I'm in the timber and I can see, maybe 100 yards through the timber, or maybe I'm on the edge of a field. Maybe I'm hunting on a field, but there's timber on the edge. I'm adjusting my focus from near to far and far to near the whole time, especially if you're looking over like just south of Vortex here, there's a big CRP field that's probably a mile north to south. Like, I can't glass that whole field and expect to see detail if I'm not changing my focus from near to far.
Right.
And so, like, I think a lot of times it probably happens where stuff gets overlooked, whether it be in the woods and you're looking through timber. But by not adjusting your focus for the distance you're looking, I think a lot of stuff probably gets looked over just because it's not in focus.
Yeah. Because they don't change the focus ring until they see something. Like,
right.
Once they see it, they're like, oh, I need to get focused in on that. Like,
I actually use the focus wheel to determine where I'm looking, if that makes sense. Like, if they're on a tripod and I'm looking out over a big open space, I'm just adjusting that focus from near to far and seeing if anything between me and that farthest distance comes into focus.
Yeah, that's good. Another tip, and I thought this is where you were going. Another tip is just slow down. Like, so many guys glass. Like, you've got, take the mile CRP field that you just said. So many dudes scan that and they're like, yeah, I don't see anything. And I'm like, dude, go back over that 9 more times and about 10 times slower than you just did.
You're not necessarily looking for a profile of a deer. You
might be looking for a tine sticking up.
Like, in your head, you need to know what you're looking for so that your brain can recognize it as you're glassing that area. So have a target in mind, like visualize what I'm looking for so that when you're glassing, your brain can pick it up faster.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting on the side of a hill with somebody or 2 or 3 guys, and everybody has seen animals except for one guy. Like, everybody's like, oh, there's a bear. Oh, there's a deer. There's an elk, whatever. And the guy on the end has not seen one thing yet. Well, and then you look over at them and they're just scanning the mountain and I'm like, dude, you've got to slow down, man. Underneath every tree in the shade, down every crack, behind every rock, like, slow down. Mm-hmm. And like you said, take your time and focus on everything. Like, there's no way you just saw 10% of what's on this hillside because you just quickly scanned it and moved on. Like, slow down, take your time. And like you said, use your focus ring. Like, man, it'll change your success rate dramatically. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll change your success rate dramatically. Now, you might not want to get into this. And if you don't, that's okay. The hype for stabilizing binoculars. A, is there any truth to the hype? And B, is Vortex ever going to do it?
It's really cool technology. I'll say that. Like, going back a bunch of years, like you probably seen some or come across them. Like, if you spend any time on the range, like competing, like somebody might have a pair and they're really cool to look through. So the hype is definitely, we'll call it real. Like, it's cool technology that, as it's become available to the consumer market, the civilian market, it's really cool. We're very, very excited to see where that goes, to see, how that looks moving into the future. My personal, like, looking at it is like one of the things that immediately kind of sticks out is like the size profile and the shape and the ergonomics of some of them are, maybe leave a little bit to be desired. But the technology is really cool. We actually do play with image stabilization a little bit. We launched our golf range finders a couple of years ago, or last year. And one of our golf range finders actually does come with image stabilization. So it's technology that, we're aware of, we're utilizing in that product. And I think the biggest thing for Vortex as it regards to that is to look at, we've never tried to be just like, oh, us too, like we do that too. We've tried to look at stuff, especially over time. Like, sometimes something will come to market and, it hits, but maybe it didn't hit exactly where it needed to hit. And so, I'll use kind of ballistics as an example. We were definitely not the first to the market with ballistic integrated rangefinders or binoculars or anything like that. we kind of sit back and see, you know, what can be done, what customers are asking for. And, one downside, you're not first to market, but the upside is that you've taken some of that feedback from customers and, alleviated some of their concerns. And so I think it's awesome technology. I think when I'm talking to people about it, there's a lot of excitement around it. There's a lot of like, it's this new thing that people are just becoming aware of. And so that's cool. There's a lot of hype, and talking with customers that use it, from a UTV or from a vehicle, or maybe, you can get the ability to hold a 15 power pair of binoculars offhand without having that shakiness. Like, that's pretty cool. I think the possibilities are endless. Like I said, we're already doing image stabilization in one of our golf range finders. And so I would expect, like almost like anything Vortex has done, is we look at what customers are asking for. We compile feedback and, kind of take note on what we can do to make a product, do what we need it to do and alleviate some of the things, maybe concerns customers have about it. And so I don't have a specific for you, but like, I would say that it's something we're well aware of. And if I know Vortex, and everything we do is like, we keep an eye on what customers ask for and try to provide, an answer for those demands. So
very cool, man.
Maybe not the answer you wanted, but
I've looked at them. I've played with them. Like you said, the shape leaves something to be desired. I think quality of glass leaves something to be desired.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I mean, it's cool that it stabilizes the image, but then I wish the glass was better. Like, I wish the actual performance of the optics themselves were better. Take the stabilization out of it. Just the actual optical performance leave something to be desired. So
yeah, I think that's the challenge, right? Like, the challenge is finding a balance. It's like, okay, well, we could do that and make the optical quality better, but they would be $5,000. Or
right.
Hey, we could make the size and shape profile better, but it would cost twice as much. So, I mean, props to any company out there that's doing image stabilized binos and doing it well, because like, the more technology you try and shove into, a pair of binoculars or a rangefinder or a rifle scope, the bigger the challenges for the engineering teams, the bigger the challenges for the assembly teams. Like, it's actually like, if you go and look at, stabilized binos on the market today, it's actually pretty impressive, like where they're at and what they cost and what they do at the price. I think, like I said, it's the Vortex way to kind of just not necessarily always be the first one to market with something, but to learn and to see what customers are asking for and to try and make our product unique to Vortex. So, it's cool stuff. And again, like, I think, a couple of things you said with just, hey, maybe optical quality is something, maybe that ergonomic size, shape, profile, but even as it sits, like, it's pretty cool to look through those things. They are wild.
It is. Yeah. I was impressed with the stabilization, not impressed with the glass.
With a couple caveats. Yep.
Well, man, Reuben, I can't tell you thank you enough, man. Optics are one of those things that you've got in my opinion, two dudes, and either they've run the same binoculars ever, never really considered much of, could I be getting more out of optics? Could I enjoy the experience more? Could I find more animals? Could I see more animals? Or you've got the guys, who are optics geeks, and they are constantly thinking about optics and constantly thinking, about new optics and, well, what optics will be best for this hunt. And so I appreciate it because, I think we're going to help out the general public in understanding what to look for when they walk into a Shields, Cabela's, Bass Pro, whatever, to buy their next pair of optics.
Well, and I think, Dylan, you hit the nail on the head. Like, there's definitely a couple of different groups of people. You fall into one category or the other, or somewhere in between. But if you're new to this and you're looking at optics as something that you're going to have to buy, you're going to have to add to your kit. I'll give you a little bit, like, just my opinion from my personal experience. You will use your glass more than almost any other piece of kit that you bring with you on a hunt.
I agree.
Whether you be a tree stand archery hunter with, chasing whitetails, or you be out west, Southeast, like it does not really matter what you're chasing or what your hunt is. You will probably have your binoculars in your hand or on a tripod more than any other piece of gear you reach for. And so if there's something that you're looking at and saying like, well, I'll just get the standard this, what everybody else says, optics are something to ask questions on. And so make sure you ask the right questions. Make sure you don't withhold any information like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Hey, I'm going to archery hunt 90% of the time, but someday I'm going to go to Africa on a safari. Like if someday happens, probably tackle that problem then. Get the thing that's right for what you do most of the time.
100%. Yeah, I agree. And optics are something that are undoubtedly, like if you're new to this, you're looking at all these numbers and you're like, what in the crap does all this mean? Like, okay, the bigger, the better. Like, I'll just get the biggest I can. Well, no, not by a long shot. So it undoubtedly can be confusing. And so that's just kind of what I wanted this to be. Just an optics rundown, an optics breakdown, an optics, how to build an optics toolkit. If you are going to introduce a spotter, should you change the size of your binos? I mean, all that stuff. So again, Reuben, I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you for what Vortex does enough. I admire companies that can bring to market really good products in a vast range of budget options. And so Vortex is just that. And guys, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to say it as simply as I can, and then I'm going to end this mug. If it says Vortex, I promise you can trust it. Like, you don't have to look at it and say, but they're only $250. Like, there must be something wrong with them. If it says Vortex, you can trust it. And you only got to buy it one time for the rest of your life. So go check out Vortex, head to your Bass Pro, your Cabela's, look at them all, try them all, figure out what you like best. Don't go to a Bass Pro Shop or Cabela's. If you want to really dive in, go to a local gun shop, local outdoor store that'll let you take them outside and try them. But guys, definitely check out Vortex for your next optics. Thanks for listening. You guys keep the dusty side up. Guys, if you like to build arrows or work on your bows at home, you have to know about a little website called papertuner.com. I have a little studio here, a little space here where I work on all my bows, and big paper tuners just used to take up all the space. You couldn't hang them anywhere nice and neat. They took up a lot of floor space. And then I come across papertuner.com. What you get from papertuner.com is an all-in-one solution to paper tune your bows. They come with all the magnetic strings, all the clips you need. You can hang it up in a matter of seconds, take it down in a matter of seconds, hang it on the wall. It is a phenomenal way to paper tune your bows. However, they also have incredible arrow spinners. They have arrow stands. If you don't have a place to hang your paper tuner, they even make tripod mounts so you can mount it on just a regular old tripod. Guys, papertuner.com is a phenomenal solution for little shops that just don't have a lot of space for a big old paper tuner. Guys, go check them out, papertuner.com. I promise you'll be glad you did.